I was sitting in my home office that evening, a mug of coffee cooling beside the keyboard, scrolling through my phone for the day's headlines. It had been a long week, and I was zoning out, half reading a news article about market forecasts, half watching the little red notifications pop up from my work apps. Then I saw a new message come in through the corporate group chat. It was from one of the marketing managers, someone I barely spoke to, but the preview image caught my attention. Bright lights, people in evening wear, champagne glasses raised in the background. A caption underneath read, Chicago Gala 2024. What a night! I opened it, expecting to see the usual corporate networking *TS, the kind where people stand in awkward semicircles and pretend they're thrilled about small talk. Instead, the first thing my eyes locked onto was Molly, my wife. She was standing under the kind of golden lighting that makes everything look softer, more glamorous. Her dress, a shimmering silver evening gown I'd never seen before, caught every glint from the chandeliers. It fit her like it was made for her, and maybe it was. But the dress wasn't what stopped me cold. She was standing next to her colleague Eric. I knew his face from a few company events. He had that easy charm that made people gravitate toward him. In the photo, his arm was draped casually around her waist, and her hand, resting on his chest, looked far too comfortable there. They were smiling, but not in the usual look at the camera way. It was closer, warmer, like there was an inside joke between them no one else was in on. And then I saw the caption. My real man, red heart dizzy, #luckygirl, #myman. I stared at the words, waiting for my brain to offer some reasonable explanation, but none came. My real man, not great colleague or gala buddy, or any of the dozens of neutral phrases people use in situations like that. My real man, hearts and sparkle emojis included. For a moment, I thought maybe I was misunderstanding it. Maybe someone else had posted the picture and added the caption as a joke. But then I noticed the username. It was Molly's. My thumb hovered over the screen, like maybe if I didn't scroll, the image wouldn't exist. But my phone vibrated again, this time with a text from a coworker I knew well. Hey John, have you seen this? And then another, man, what's going on with that post? By the time I checked Instagram, Facebook, and even LinkedIn, the picture had already made its way across every corner of social media. I didn't even have to look for it. People were sending it to me unprompted, some with teasing emojis, others with the kind of awkward silence you can hear in a text. The rest of my workday was a blur. I couldn't focus on the numbers on my screen because that image kept popping into my mind. Molly in that gown, her hand on Eric's chest. The caption. Every time it felt like a punch to the ribs. When I got home, I tried to play it cool. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, hair pulled back, wearing an oversized sweatshirt like it was just any other night. The contrast between the Molly in the photo and the Molly in front of me was almost jarring. Hey, I said, setting my keys down. So, Chicago, huh? She glanced up from cutting vegetables, her expression neutral. Yeah, what about it? I didn't realize you were going to a gala. Oh, it was last minute. Work thing, she said, too quickly. They had extra tickets. It wasn't a big deal. I took a breath, leaned against the counter. The post, in the corporate chat, and on Instagram. Her knife paused mid-slice. Oh, that. She let out a laugh that felt rehearsed. Come on, Jonathan, you're not actually upset about that, are you? It was a joke. Just a silly thing between colleagues. Eric posted it on my phone while we were taking pictures. He thought it would be funny. Funny? I asked, trying to keep my tone even. She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. Yeah, you know how it is at those events. Everyone's joking around, trying to make the night more interesting. It doesn't mean anything. I wanted to push, to tell her that most people don't joke about their real man unless they mean it. But the way she went right back to slicing vegetables, as if the conversation was already over, made me hesitate. She was treating it like it was too trivial to warrant a discussion. Maybe that was the point. Still, her explanation didn't sit right with me. Not the timing, not the phrasing, not the way she avoided looking at me for more than a second. In that moment, I told myself I'd let it go. People were watching, after all, both in our office circles and online. The last thing I wanted was to overreact to a public joke and end up looking insecure. But even as I sat down for dinner, pretending to listen to her talk about her day, my mind kept circling back to that image. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just seen the tip of something much bigger, something she didn't want me to find. And that tiny flicker of doubt, it didn't fade. It started to grow. I wish I could say that picture was a one-off, a glitch in an otherwise steady life. But once you see a crack, you start noticing the hairlines that were always there. After the gala photo, the reel in my head started playing backwards, splicing together moments I'd filed under "not worth a fight." It was like discovering the attic door had been ajar for months and pretending the draft was just in my imagination. The late meetings came first in the replay. They used to be rare, then they were weekly, then they were routine. I remember a Tuesday in March when Molly texted me at 6:48 p.m. "Running late, don't wait up," and I ate spaghetti over the sink like a bachelor because I didn't want to sit at the table alone. She came home after 10, smelling like a blend of expensive perfume and lobby air, the kind pumped through hotels to make you feel richer than you are. When I asked how the meeting went, she said, "Fine," with the same tone you use when a barista asks if you want a receipt. Then there was the tracker. We'd shared locations for years, half safety, half convenience. Grab me if you pass a pharmacy kind of thing. One day it just stopped. A little gray circle on my map where her pin used to be. I asked if her phone had bugged out. She said the app must have updated and reset permissions. She never toggled them back. I told myself it was no big deal, that privacy in a marriage isn't a crime. But the absence sat there like a missing tooth I couldn't stop tonguing. The phone calls migrated to the bathroom around the same time. I'd hear the water run for a few seconds, then pause, then her voice low and careful behind the door. Sometimes the vent fan would kick on mid-sentence, as if the white noise might scrub the words from the air. When I knocked to ask if she needed a towel, the conversation would evaporate. "It's just work," she'd say through the door. "Go ahead and watch your show." Passwords shifted too. She used to ask me to log into her laptop when she was driving or timing something in the oven or just lazy. Then one day the familiar string failed, and a new lock screen greeted me with a hint she claimed she couldn't remember setting. "IT made us change everything," she said, shrugging. Later, when I reached for her phone to add a calendar invite for a friend's barbecue, she gently took it back like I'd grabbed a hot pan. "I'll do it," she said, smiling too brightly. "You'll mess up my colors." Business trips multiplied like weeds, and the destinations didn't make sense. Omaha in January, Spokane in May. Client development, she called it. But when I asked which client, she gave me acronyms that sounded like passwords, not partners. I'm not an idiot. I looked up her company's offices one night. They had hubs in Chicago, New York, Dallas, and San Francisco. Not once did she say any of those. The itineraries were always PDFs forwarded from some travel portal, shiny and generic, like a brochure trying too hard. She bought dresses she never wore around me. Slick, structured things with careful seams, tags from boutiques I had to Google. They arrived in flat boxes tied with ribbon. When I complimented one and asked when I'd get to see it, she said, "Oh, this is for a work dinner. You'd be bored." I tried to laugh it off, make a joke about expense reports and soufflés. She laughed too, but it was the kind of laugh you give a flight attendant when your carry-on obviously won't fit overhead. Vacations dissolved in the same season. We used to plan little escapes, nothing extravagant, just lakes and cabins and 2-day road trips with gas station coffee and podcasts we paused to argue about. This year she was too busy. Too many quarterlies, too many launches, too many somethings. "We'll make up for it in the fall," she said, and clicked accept on another calendar invite that didn't include me. Receipts started appearing in places that didn't belong to us. I found one in the dryer lint trap, how, I have no idea, for a restaurant with linen napkins and a wine list that reads like poetry. 2 entrees, a bottle I can't pronounce, and a dessert to share. Another time I reached into the glove box for the registration and pulled out a parking stub stamped by a downtown hotel I'd only ever walked past. "That was for a client showcase," she said, and rolled her window down even though it was 42 degrees. I remembered, too, the way she edited herself. Molly used to narrate her day like a radio host. Little bits of office gossip, the good banter, the petty frustrations. Lately her stories came pre-sanded. Names clipped, details blurred. "You don't want to hear about work," she'd say, and I'd tell her I did. But she was already halfway up the stairs, calling that she'd be right back. My brain went on a scavenger hunt, finding clues I'd ignored. A new gym bag in the hall closet with a boutique logo I recognized from targeted ads. Dry cleaning slips in her coat pocket for labels I've never seen her wear to our dinner table. A second charger that lived in her tote because, she said, conference rooms are stingy. There was a night in April I keep coming back to. I woke up at 2:11 a.m. to an empty bed and a blue halo leaking under the bathroom door. I knocked, worried she was sick. "I'm fine," she called, voice too steady. When she came back to bed, her hands were cold from holding her phone. She tucked herself close and fell asleep fast, like someone who didn't want to answer questions. I started making small tests, the kind you can deny. "How's Kelly?" I asked over breakfast, naming a coworker she used to mention. "Oh, she's good," Molly said, not asking why I asked. "And Eric?" I said, as casually as I could manage. She buttered toast with clinician focus. "He's fine," she said. "Why?" "No reason." I lied, and watched the knife scrape the plate. I told myself all marriages have seasons. People get busy, pull inward, forget to narrate. I tried to be generous. I took on more around the house. Figured I'd remove friction so we could glide back to each other. I fixed the leaky faucet, organized the garage, finally scheduled the tree trimming we'd postponed twice. When she noticed, she hugged me with one arm while texting with the other. Even the dog noticed. Daisy used to camp at the door when Molly was out, ears tuned to the specific rhythm of her footsteps. Lately she gave up and slept by my desk, lifting her head when headlights slowed on our street and dropping it again when they kept going. Sounds silly, but the dog's resignation got to me. Animals don't understand jokes. I remembered the passwords most of all. The new ones, not the characters themselves, but the idea that access had changed. There's a line between privacy and secrecy. We used to live on the first side of it. Somewhere along the way, we crossed. After the gala photo, the montage stopped being theoretical and started feeling like a ledger. Every late night, every gray location, every hushed call added a line to the account. I didn't confront her right away. Pride? Fear? Maybe I wanted the benefit of being wrong. Maybe I wanted one more ordinary morning where we both pretended the story made sense. That morning never came. What arrived instead were little confirmations, not quite proof, but sharp enough to scratch. A lipstick I didn't recognize left open on the bathroom counter, the shade too bold for the woman who married me. A stray text preview that flashed "can't wait" before the screen locked. A song in her recently played list that wasn't her style at all but matched the playlist Eric blasted at last year's holiday party. Memory can be a liar, sure, but it can also be a witness. Mine stood up, cleared its throat, and swore to tell the truth. And whether or not I wanted to hear it, the truth had a sound now. The soft click of a bathroom lock, the buzz of a phone turned face down, the small, practiced laugh of someone who spent weeks rehearsing an answer. I used to think the worst part of suspicion was not knowing. I'm starting to learn it's the knowing that you knew, and choosing not to look too closely because looking would mean you'd have to act. A week after the gala photo, the uneasy flicker in my mind turned into something heavier. I've been walking around with that image in my head like a bad song you can't get rid of. Molly's hand on Eric's chest. That caption. Her laugh when I confronted her. Like the whole thing was so beneath discussion. Then, out of nowhere, the truth didn't just knock. It kicked the door in. It came from a man I hadn't seen in years, Dan Miller, an old acquaintance from college who now worked for one of our Chicago suppliers. He called me out of the blue on a Thursday morning, his voice low, like he was telling me about a death in the family. "John, I hate to be the one to tell you this," he said, "but I was at that gala last week. I saw Molly." My chest tightened. "Yeah, I know she was there." "No," Dan said quickly. "You don't get it. I saw her leave. She left with that guy, Eric, I think his name was. They got in the same taxi. And, the next morning they were having breakfast at the Hyatt. Same table, same clothes as the night before. For a few seconds I couldn't speak. The images formed in my mind without permission. Her stepping into the cab, the early morning hotel dining room, sunlight on plates of half-eaten toast. His hand maybe brushing hers as he passed the coffee. "You're sure about this?" I asked finally, though my voice didn't sound like my own. Dan sighed. "I'm sorry, man. I figured you deserved to know. I didn't want you finding out from someone else." I thanked him, hung up, and just sat there at my desk, staring at nothing. It's strange how still the world can feel when your own life is coming apart. Phones ringing, people talking outside the office door, and yet it all sounded far away, like I was hearing it underwater. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, not until I had more than a sighting from an old acquaintance. But part of me already knew this was it. The proof. That night it arrived. I was at home, making coffee I didn't need, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Inside were 5 screech *TS. I tapped the first one and felt my stomach drop. It was a text from Molly to Eric. "You're the best part of my life right now. I can't wait to see you again." The second, "Last night was perfect. You make me feel alive in a way I haven't in years." Then one from Eric. "I keep thinking about you in that dress. The way you looked at me across the table." Another from Molly. "I wish we didn't have to hide. But you're worth it." The final one was a selfie of the two of them, her head on his shoulder, taken in a hotel room I didn't recognize. The curtains were drawn, but the morning light still seeped in at the edges. She was wearing a t-shirt that wasn't hers. I stared at them for a long time, my hands tightening around the phone until my knuckles hurt. I don't know who sent them. Maybe someone in their circle who'd had enough, maybe someone trying to stir the pot. It didn't matter. Between Dan's account, the breakfast sighting, and these messages, the picture was complete. There was no joke between colleagues now. No last-minute work thing. No plausible deniability. This was a deliberate choice, repeated and nurtured. An affair. I didn't confront her right away. I thought I would. I imagined the whole thing. Her walking in the door, me tossing the phone onto the table, saying, "Explain this." But instead, I felt this cold clarity settle over me. The anger was there, sure, but it wasn't the wild kind that makes you pace the room. It was quiet, controlled. I realized I had two choices. Explode now and give her a scene to twist into her narrative, or keep my mouth shut and start planning. So I sat in that kitchen, sipping coffee that had gone lukewarm, scrolling through the screech *TS again and again until I knew every word, every timestamp. I saved them to a hidden drive. I emailed them to myself under a nondescript subject line. I wasn't going to let anything accidentally disappear. Around 9 that night, she came home. She was in jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, the kind of casual look she wore when she wanted to signal she'd just been running errands. She smiled faintly when she saw me, then glanced at her phone before heading straight upstairs. "Long day," I called after her. "Yeah," she said without turning around. "Meetings." I almost laughed. In bed later, she lay next to me scrolling through her phone, the faint blue light painting her face. I closed my eyes and pictured her in that hotel dining room, in that t-shirt that wasn't hers, texting him about how alive he made her feel. My hands curled into fists under the blanket. But I kept my breathing steady, because now I knew, and knowing was the one thing she couldn't take back. By the next morning, the hurt had hardened into resolve. She was still sleeping when I got up, dressed quietly, and went into my office. I pulled out a notepad and began making a list. Dates, trips, excuses she'd given. Next to them, I started matching the proof I had, receipts, photos, screech *TS. A timeline was taking shape. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet, but I knew this much. The moment I laid it all out, there would be no debate, no spin, no "you're overreacting." There would only be the truth. Molly left for Minneapolis on a Tuesday morning, suitcase rolling over the tile like a metronome. She kissed the air near my cheek, close enough to suggest affection, far enough to avoid contact, and said she'd be back Friday night. Back before the weekend. she added, as if weekends still meant the two of us on the same page. I watched the rideshare taillights fade and stood in the doorway longer than necessary. It felt like waiting for a storm to pass when the radar already shows the swirl directly overhead. Then I shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and started. I began with the locks. Not the symbolic kind, the actual ones. Our front door had that keypad she insisted on because keys are antiquated. I changed the master code, then the 2 guest codes we'd given to a neighbor and her sister years ago. I deleted the app on her phone from the household list and added a new physical key just for me in a drawer only I used. Small clicks, small confirmations like fastening a life jacket. Next came the digital perimeter. I logged into our shared accounts and did a quiet audit: credit cards, checking, savings, brokerage, the line of credit we'd opened to remodel the kitchen and never used. The numbers looked the same as last month. The patterns did not. 2 restaurant charges I didn't recognize, a boutique hotel authorization that had reversed, rideshares to neighborhoods we never visit. I called the bank and set alerts for purchases over $50. Then opened a new individual checking and savings. My name only. I set 2-factor authentication everywhere, and when the prompts popped up on my phone, I felt the faintest relief, the way you do when a seatbelt clicks home. Freezing isn't dramatic. It's paperwork. I removed her as an authorized user from my personal card, paused the joint card, and requested new plastic with a different number. On the phone, the rep tried to be cheerful. "Protecting yourself is smart, Mr. Hale," she said, as if we were discussing sunscreen. I thanked her and took notes on a legal pad like I was learning a recipe. Our insurance was next: medical, dental, vision, the corporate life policy you forget exists until HR reminds you in November. I notified my company that my spouse should be suspended pending family status review. It sounded clinical because it was. I asked about COBRA timelines in case she contested. I printed the plan documents and slid them into a folder labeled Molly, Evidence and Admin. I didn't like the label. Kept it anyway. Then I packed. There's a mechanical comfort in folding. Shirts into thirds, then halves. Jeans by weight. Dresses rolled the way the internet says prevents wrinkles. I went room by room, giving myself rules so I wouldn't get stuck. Everything clearly hers went into boxes. Everything arguably ours stayed. I set aside the wedding album, sat with it for exactly 9 minutes, closed it, and put it on the ours shelf. I wasn't going to outsource my history to a storage unit, even if I was outsourcing her shoes. By noon, the living room looked like a departure lounge. A friend once told me that you can tell the shape of a life by its cables. He was right. There were chargers everywhere: phone, watch, laptop, a curling iron that evidently needed firmware updates. I coiled them carefully and labeled each loop with blue painter's tape. Not out of kindness, but because I wanted to resist the chaos she'd left me with. Order was the only thing I had that didn't feel negotiable. At 1, the storage company called back. They had a 10x10 available and a truck at 3. Perfect. I signed the contract electronically, requested a lock, and paid for 3 months upfront. If she wanted the unit after that, she could put it on her own card. Between calls, I drafted the letter. It wasn't a manifesto, not a speech. It was an index. I listed dates, times, corroboration. Dan's account from Chicago, the breakfast sighting at the Hyatt, the screensh *TS, sanitized, printed, timestamped. I attached copies of company policies from her employee handbook: conduct, social media, conflicts of interest, travel approvals. I added the relevant sections of our state's marital property and fault statutes that my lawyer had highlighted the day before. It felt like building a bridge out of paper. Fragile to look at, but strong enough to cross. My attorney, Reed, answered on the second ring. "Ready?" he asked, no small talk. "Ready?" I said, surprising myself with how steady it sounded. We walked through the checklist again. File the petition on Friday morning. Request an emergency temporary order for exclusive use of the residence. Freeze large joint disbursements. Document the assets with photos and serial numbers. He reminded me not to touch her personal email or log into anything I didn't already have access to. "You don't need to be the story," he said. "Let the facts be the story." At 2:40, I boxed the last of her things from the bathroom, skincare bottles lined like a tiny parade, 2 perfumes I recognized and one I didn't, and the t-shirt she liked to sleep in that wasn't mine. I hesitated with the shirt, then folded it and placed it on top of a stack. I wasn't going to be sentimental about the wrong things. The movers arrived at 3:10, efficient and friendly in the way people are when your life is just another stop on their route. I directed them to the piles, tipped them in cash, and watched as they ferried the boxes away. The house sounded different as it emptied, less muffled, more honest. Daisy followed them to the door and then came back to me, confused. I knelt and scratched behind her ears. "We're okay," I said, realizing I was talking to both of us. When the truck pulled away, I wiped the counters, vacuumed the rug, and opened the windows. The air smelled like cardboard and lemon cleaner. I set one thing on the kitchen table, a large manila envelope, centered, with her name in block letters. Inside were the divorce papers already signed by me, a list of the items in storage with a unit number and access code, the index of evidence, and a single-page letter dated and calm. In the letter I wrote what I refused to perform out loud, that I was done being asked to ignore reality, that I was choosing dignity over debate, that further contact should go through Reed unless the topic was strictly logistical. I didn't insult her, didn't moralize. I told the truth in declarative sentences and left white space where the apologies might have been if this were a different life. Before I left the table, I placed her building badge and a company-issued credit card beside the envelope. Both were technically hers to return, but the gesture mattered. Actions have a way of setting the tone. I wanted the tone to be final. Late afternoon slid into evening. I took pictures of every room, angles wide enough to show condition, close-ups for anything valuable, then uploaded them to a private drive. I emailed Reed a link and texted my neighbor that everything was fine but that if anyone tried to make a scene in my driveway, to call me first, not the HOA. He sent back a thumbs up and a casserole emoji. Suburban diplomacy. I stood at the sliding door and watched the lake blur into dusk. The old boat sat by the dock like a dog that still believes it's young. I made a mental note to replace the rope and sand the transom. The mental note sounded like hope. By the time darkness settled, the house felt both emptier and lighter. I turned off the lights and, out of habit, checked the door again. The new code blinked back at me, a quiet, green affirmation. I went upstairs, set my phone on the nightstand face down, and lay in a bed that finally felt like neutral ground. Somewhere between wake and sleep, I thought of her rolling her suitcase through an airport far from Minneapolis. The word work stretched like a tarp over something else. I imagined her opening the envelope, scanning the pages, recognizing the map of consequences she'd drawn for us. Maybe she'd rage. Maybe she'd cry. Maybe she'd call Eric and say my name out loud for once in their private conversations. It didn't matter. The point wasn't her reaction. The point was the lock, the ledger, the letter. In the morning, I'd drive to the courthouse. Tonight, I let the quiet be mine. I didn't sleep much after sealing the envelope. Dawn came in layers, gray, then a pale blue that made the kitchen look cleaner than it felt. I brewed coffee, read my letter once more, and drove to the courthouse. Paper in, stamp down, receipt printed. The end of a marriage sounded like nothing, just the rustle of forms and the thump of a date stamp. I didn't go to the office afterward. In a parking lot 2 blocks away, I opened my laptop and sent one more email. Recipient: compliance and ethics. Subject: potential violations, travel authorization, conduct, social media. The body was clinical. Facts, dates, ***, ts. No adjectives. I attached the index I'd built and clicked send. Somewhere a queue lit up. Somewhere a case number attached itself to our lives. By noon, a woman from compliance called. Her voice was careful, every sentence a sworn statement. "Mr. Hale, we received your submission. We'd like to collect context and confirm scope. Are you available at 2? "I am." She thanked me in a tone that wasn't warm and wasn't cold. Professional, like a gloved hand. 2, I repeated the details. I answered what I could and declined what I shouldn't. When she asked why I came to them instead of to my wife, I told the truth. The caption wasn't just a caption. The hotel charge wasn't just a charge. The public behavior, paired with the private messages, wasn't just personal. It was policy with a badge and a brand attached to it. "We'll proceed," she said. "Security will coordinate with us. Legal is looped in." "What does that mean today?" I asked. "It means we'll meet with Molly when she returns. We'll follow our process." Process. The word was oddly comforting. A map you don't have to draw while your hands are shaking. Wednesday, she flew home. I knew from a calendar alert on our old shared board I hadn't deleted yet. Around 10, a message pinged from a friend in IT. "Heads up, security asked for her access list." Then another, "We're on standby." At 11:40, my phone rang. Internal exchange. "Mr. Hale? This is Carla from HR. We're about to begin. We may follow up afterward for anything we're missing." I said okay and went very still. Here's what I know, because people talk when things break. Molly showed up for what she thought was an urgent project sync. A war room without a war. Instead, she found Carla from HR, Damon from corporate security, and Neha from legal. Someone had printed the posts, messages, and photos, stacking them like a brochure for a life she didn't live. Carla began. Damon asked about travel forms and who had approved Chicago. Neha slid the screensh *TS across the table one at a time. Each page had a small blue tab with a date and a time. The room was quiet except for paper and breath. She said it was a joke. My IT friend told me later over Signal. About the caption. But the messages weren't jokes. And the hotel record, yeah. When they asked for her laptop, she hesitated, as if muscle memory could conjure a password that would save her. Damon was kind but firm. "The device belongs to the company." He handed her a padded sleeve and a receipt for surrender. Her badge deactivated while it was still around her neck. The system timestamped it at 11:58. She tried it on the door as a dare to reality and watched the light stay red. I didn't see any of this. I only felt it, the way you feel an elevator drop before your stomach catches up. At noon, the shared calendar booted me out of the old board. At 12:07, her chat status went gray. At 12:19, my phone lit up with a single text from an unsaved number. "What did you do?" No name. I didn't need one. I didn't answer. The official email reached me at 3:12, a copy of a notice sent to Molly. Administrative leave, pending investigation, access suspended. 3 paragraphs of procedure and a PDF labeled acknowledgement. The sender line read, "Human Resources." No one's name, just the department. Somewhere, boxes with her clothes sat in a rented unit. The blue tape labels I'd scribbled in a hurry told a plainer story than any email. Shoes, dresses, chargers, a life sorted by rooms. That evening, gossip did what gossip does. First a question, then a shrug, then a certainty that's mostly wrong. I ignored it. I walked Daisy. I reheated pasta. I put the letter back in the envelope so I wouldn't reread it for sport, because grief likes to dress up as victory if you let it. 7:40, she called. I watched the screen ring out. Then she texted, "You're trying to ruin me." Then, "Answer me." Then, "Please." The last one didn't have punctuation. The absence felt like truth. I typed and erased half a dozen responses. In the end, I sent one sentence. "All future contact goes through Reed." It read colder than I felt. Maybe that was best. I slept badly. In my dream, the badge reader at her office door beeped and beeped. A metronome for a song nobody wanted to sing. Morning brought practicalities. Compliance requested chain of custody declarations. I provided metadata where I had it and dates where I didn't. They asked for the names of anyone who had forwarded the images. I gave them Dan's number and said he'd already done the right thing. Around noon, Carla called again. We met with Molly a second time. Access remains suspended. We'll issue a determination shortly. What does shortly mean? Days, not weeks. I thanked her and hung up. My hands stopped shaking. It felt like standing after a long boat ride. That afternoon, I walked to the dock and ran a palm across the old boat's rail. The varnish had gone cloudy. I made a small list sand seal replace the bow line. Work you can see. Work that answers back. By sunset, the determination arrived. Not to me, not at first, but to her. Someone in finance texted someone in operations who texted someone in sales who texted my IT friend who, after a stretch of ellipses, sent me a screensh asterisk T, employee separation in progress, collect equipment, revoke accounts, notify benefits. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the quiet of a hallway after a door soft closes. Everything after that moved fast. A courier came for her key fob. Legal sent a reminder about preserving personal data that touched corporate matters. Her bio disappeared from the website. The cached version lingered. By night, the desk that had been hers was a rectangle of lighter carpet. I didn't make it happen by myself. I turned on the light. The process did what the process does. People asked if I felt guilty. I told them guilt belongs to the person who posts a heart over a lie and calls it a joke. Accountability is just gravity with a letterhead. At night, I sat on the steps with Daisy and thought about punishment versus consequence. Punishment is personal. Consequence is math. You add choices long enough and eventually the sum shows up in a conference room with a stack of paper and a badge that turns red. I didn't win anything today. I just stopped losing quietly.